In this video, we are going to introduce the IR hedging spreadsheet. So this is a spreadsheet designed to help you visualize and think about how interest rate products work in derivatives. So let me start by just walking you through the spreadsheet as a whole, and then I'll introduce some of the functionality. First off, some color coding here, just so you have some sense of what the cells are. There are really three primary kinds of cells that are used. You can see here on the left here, there are a couple of cells that are dark blue background with white text. Those are inputs, things you might change in the spreadsheet. There are gray cells like these, which have calculations in them. They show you information. They're things that you might be interested or might not be interested in, but they're not meant to be changed. And then finally, and again, everything's zero right now, we'll change that in a minute, there are these cells here which have bold text. Right now this is a zero, but they're bold text with the gray background, and those are outputs, so things that you're intended to look at. Most of the time on this workbook, you're going to spend the time in the summary sheet, but we might as well walk through the whole spreadsheet so you have a nice sense of what's going on. So this is your summary sheet. What you have is a small balance sheet which tells you the present value of your positions. Again, we can see different kinds of positions in here. We have 3-month SOFR futures, forward starting loans, cash flows, and swaps. So that's our balance sheet. There are risks. These next sections here are about risk. And basically what the spreadsheet does is it allows you to put in positions. They go into the balance sheet and then run and then hedge risk. So if you run risk, right now there's nothing in the spreadsheet, so it won't do anything. But if you run risk, you're going to find out how many dollars in this, for example, in this cell, this will change the December 2024 3-month SOFR futures contract. And it'll tell you how many dollars you make or lose when the interest rates change. This bump size here tells the spreadsheet how much to make the interest rates change. So this is 1 basis point. You're going to get your what's called DV01 in this cell. Okay, to walk through the rest of the spreadsheet so you know what's in this workbook, we've got the market data. The market data for this is SOFR related market instruments. So we've got the SOFR rate that comes from the New York Fed. That's the overnight SOFR rate. 3-month SOFR futures, those are coming from the Chicago Mercantile Exchange. These are the prices for the next set of futures. And then SOFR 1-year swaps. So these are swaps 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, and 10 years. We can change those clearly. And those are the fixed swap rates associated with that. So this would be a 4.185% fixed rate on a 5-year swap where cash flows are being exchanged every year. All right, we've got some calculations. I'm not going to go into the calculations, but you've got some calculations which are used to create the yield curve. These are for illustration purposes only. We'll see in just a second. We've got the yield curve summary, which is the actual yield curve. And if we look at the yield curve summary for a second here, we're going to see a function called out to something called IR hedging, which is an addin library, and the function's called yield curve. And basically it takes the value date, the date on which the spreadsheet is based, all of the market information, and it returns continuously compounded interest rates for every day that's in the spreadsheet. So the first date is 2 days out, the next one's 122 days, and so on. And these are the continuously compounded rates, which can be used to discount a cash flow. So a cash flow that happened 486 days from the value date would be discounted with 5.0231%. The spreadsheet is designed to linearly interpolate. So for example, we have a 395-day continuously compounded rate and a 486-day continuously compounded rate. If we go over here and we put in, let's say 500, we'll see that the rate is between these two rates, right? And it's linearly interpolated between the two rates. So that's kind of how our spreadsheet's designed. We can see a picture here of the yield curve. The date, let me go back for a second. The value date here is November 2023. And so we had slightly higher rates in the front, tailing down to about 4% in the back. The next few worksheets are position keeping. So basically, if we book into the sheet, and we'll see how to do this in a second. So for futures contracts, the 3-month SOFR futures, we're going to see them here. If we book a forward starting loan, we're going to see it here. If we book a cash flow, we're going to see it here. If we book an interest rate swap, we're going to see it here. Finally, we've also got a swap calculator. So if you're interested in a particular interest rate swap, you can key in the details here, and it will lay out all of these are all the calculations, but it will lay out all the cash flows. You can see your floating cash flows. You can see your fixed cash flows, the net cash flows, the present value of those cash flows, and the present value. If we look here for a second, this is a 7-year swap. Negative $5 million means you're paying fixed, receiving SOFR. The fair rate is 4.125. If we put in 4.125 in, we find a present value of 0, which is what you would expect. Again, most of these cash flows are laid out in the sheet. The fair rate is calculated using this addin library, and it calculates the thing called swap rate. All of the positions, swaps, cash flows, forward starting loans, and SOFR futures, the position, if we look here, maybe forward starting loan, we can look here, there is this addin library that calculates forward starting loan price from the details that are in the sheet. We'll look at this again in just a minute. There's also an addin which calculates the forward rate, the fair forward rate, according to this market information. All right, let's go back to the beginning summary worksheet so we can see how this is meant to be used. If you have the addin library properly loaded, you will see an interest rates menu item here, which loads a ribbon. So this is a ribbon. All of your functionalities accessible through the ribbon. There is a help file, which will pop out to an HTML page, a web page, which describes all the functionality. Let's walk through these one by one. Clear trades removes all the trades from the portfolio. So it's always a good idea whenever you start anything, or if you've messed up, or if you've been doing something, clearing trades gets you back to the beginning. The next 4 buttons allow you to book trades. So let's click the forward loan button for a second. And what we see is over here on the right, a task pane appears. It's got some defaults in it. So this is a 1-year forward starting loan. It starts in a year, right? Again, our value date here is November 18th, 2023. Start date's November 18th, 2024. Goes out for a year. So this is a 1-year forward starting loan. You can put an agreed rate. So what rate are we agreeing the loan? So for example, let's just change this for a second. So let's change this to February 2025. So that's a 3-month loan. And you can see we've got an agreed rate, 4.2123. Down here, you can see the various cash flows. The first cash flow is $1 million. Positive number means we're receiving. Second cash flow, we have to pay back $1 million plus interest. The interest is $10,764.79. Takes present values and calculates the present value of the transaction. If we were to book this as it is, we would see $743.50 appearing in the workbook. Basically over here, forward starting loans, we get plus $743. Total, we get plus $743. We also have this button here, the fair forward rate. If we click it, it's calculated the fair forward rate, and when we click the button, it changes the agreed rate to be the fair rate. First cash flow is the same, second cash flow is different now, and we can see the present value is now 0. So we'll start with that. We booked the forward starting loan. You can see now we've got a 0 here in our spreadsheet. We've got the loan spreadsheet. Hold on a second. Let's go to the forward starting loans tab, and you can see now it's put the trade into our sheet. If I click clear trades, it gets rid of all the positions. Let's book the forward starting loan again. So we've got it back in. All right, we can also book futures, cash flows, and swaps. Same kind of idea. If I click on, let's say, the cash flow, you've got how much, you've got when it's going to be paid, and you've got a present value. If we book this cash flow, the present value will go up by $949,000. Let's go back to our summary sheet. There's my $949,000. Okay, so we can book positions into our sheet. We can then run risk. So let me run risk on this. What this button has done is it changes for this section, it changes every piece of market data, everything on this workbook. So it changes every piece of market data. It changes the interest rate underlying it up by 1 basis point, and it finds the P&L. So basically it goes, we started here at $949,000. We make an interest rate go up by 1 basis point. We get a new P&L, a new present value of the trades. It puts that difference into this. We also, in this workbook, have the continuously compounded risk. So all that's doing is it's changing the continuously compounded rates. Again, those we calculate on this yield curve summary workbook. Changes all of those. First, in parallel, changes every rate by 1 basis point. We lose 71.26, and then changes the individual rates by 1 basis point. We lose, we make. So for example, 71.26, that's changing. Well, it's probably hard to pull off in here. I was thinking I could pull it off. I could increase all the rates by 1 basis point, and I would get the 71.26. Now, just so you're aware, this button works in the background. So basically, none of the calculations, pretty much everything in this workbook is for you to see. When we run the risk, it does it pulls all of the trades, it pulls all the market data out of the spreadsheet, runs the risk, does all the calculations, and puts the calculations back into the workbook. If I look at this for a second, right now, and again, ignoring these rates for a second, but let's just look at these. Right now, I lose, call it about $25 per basis point for the December, the March, and the June contracts. I'm losing on the 3-month, I'm losing when rates go up on the 3-month SOFR futures contracts. That means it's like I'm long. To hedge, I have to go short. So if I go to my SOFR futures, again, we can see the screen here. It pops up, the task pane. If we go short, one contract each of those first 3 contracts, December, March, June. You can see here December, March, June. Book the futures in. Again, no profit and loss from that. Run the risk. We can see those risks are essentially hedged. So that's kind of the exercise we often do in this workbook is we put in a position, we look at the risk, we figure out how to hedge the risk, and we see what happens. If we got the hedging correct, then this works. Okay, so 2 last buttons. Well, we haven't talked about the swap button. Swap button brings up a task pane for booking an interest rate swap. Pretty straightforward and self-explanatory. Run risk we've done. The YC button, which has this little file indicator, we can upload and download yield curves into this sheet. So for example, right now there's data for November 18th, 2023. If I click download, it's going to save a file in my downloads directory with the market data. So basically everything on this sheet plus the value date. If I upload, I can upload a previously saved file or a file that maybe someone else has given you. I can upload a previously saved file with the market data. So this is a great way to take a snapshot of where you are. This gets used sometimes in some problems where the problem might give you a yield curve. It might ask you to hedge, and it might say, okay, now what happens to your workbook, how much money do you make and lose if the yield curve changes, and it might give you those changes. So that's the spreadsheet. In order to get this to work, you need the workbook itself, and you need access to the addin. So basically the workbook does nothing without the addin. None of the functions work. None of the calculations work without the addin. And the addin really does nothing without the workbook. I hope that was helpful. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out.